Hello and welcome. I am Tiberius, and today I'm continuing my interview series about getting into cybersecurity. I'm joined by Patrick Laverty, a pentester and social engineer who hails from Rhode Island, and who described himself as old, contains multiple replacement parts, and likes hockey. He's here because he had another unconventional path into the industry, starting out working in professional baseball before his pivot to pen testing, and is well known as the founder of the Layer 8 Conference for Social Engineering and Intelligence. I'm going to repeat that. And is well known as the founder of the Layer 8 Conference for Social Engineering and Intelligence Gathering. Patrick, welcome to my channel, and thank you for being here to share your knowledge and experiences with us.
Hey, thanks, Tiberius. I've really been looking forward to this. It's always fun to chat with you.
So you began your career in sports medicine and even achieved your goal of working in professional baseball. What inspired you to make the leap into cybersecurity, and how did you manage that transition from athletic training to hacking?
Oh, we're getting right into this story, aren't we? Can we also probably even first wish people a happy 5th of November with our Guy Fawkes masks? All right, anyway.
For those listening to the podcast, Patrick just got a Guy Fawkes mask, the anonymous mask, out. So yes, happy November 5th.
So hopefully people are enjoying that and not burning too many things. Anyway, all right, so we're going to get right into the transition. Yeah, so like you mentioned, I was working in the field of sports medicine. So I did that for about 6 years, both working in professional sports, working in a physical therapy clinic. And I think I just bought my own computer one night, one of those big, huge Dell kind of things that cost thousands of dollars. And I was always just fascinated by it, where after work, I would sit on the computer all night. And this was like basically pre-internet days. So now we have people who sit around all day on the internet. Well, this was before that. There wasn't those types of things to do. So I would just kind of go through the computer and open up all different kinds of applications, figure out how things worked, started digging in. And then one of the things that I was able to figure out is that you can actually copy websites. And I was like, this is super cool. You just do the view source, you copy that into like a notepad file, you can open it up in a browser, and you can have your own copy. And I remember when I was in the physical therapy clinic, I mentioned that to one of the patients that I was working with, because I knew that she worked in an IT department. And she was like, you know what? You can even write your own from scratch. And she brought in a book on HTML, and my world just, it blew open. I'm like, this is incredible. I need to do this kind of thing. But this was back in the late 90s, where, again, really not much of an internet. And I know today, if somebody says, well, I want to go get training on something, the first place they're going to look is for online training. That didn't exist. So at that same time, I was like, well, I need to figure out how to do this. And really, the way that you did it was by going probably to a university. And one of the things that I was able to find was up at Harvard University, they have this thing called their extension school. So if you're not familiar with the extension school at Harvard, or I'm guessing there are other universities that have this similar type of thing, it's night school for their staff. And you can take just about any class that you want at the university. And at that time, the classes cost $25. So imagine being able to take a class at Harvard University for $25. And I'm like, this is outstanding. But again, remember that little hook to it. It's for employees only. So I'm like, I need to figure out that part. What I did next was I just took whatever I could find as the crappiest possible desk job at Harvard. I think it was in some research department where I was an assistant to the financial person for the grant that thing was running. And basically all I was doing was filling out expense reports for the PhD faculty researchers. But it was my way in to be able to go to the extension school. And that was my first exposure to anything IT related, where I took a class in C++ and got to learn how that kind of programming worked. I took a class in Java, learned how that type of thing worked. And then from there, I went on to be able to teach Java for Sun Microsystems. This was back in the 98, 99, 2000 .com boom era, where everybody was looking to learn about Java. So I got a job where I was traveling around the country every week teaching an intro to Java class. It was quite often to people transitioning from C++ and other similar languages, wanting to learn how object-oriented worked if they didn't come from a C++ background. And that's really how I was able to make the transition from there.
That's awesome. So I know that you'd mentioned to me previously, like you had a crappy job with a good opportunity. I'd always assumed that was some kind of like entry-level cyber position, but no, it was literally just, how do I work for Harvard to take advantage of the discounts? That's really cool.
Absolutely. It was just go right through all their job listings and find anything that I could possibly get just to get a job somewhere there. So then I would qualify to be able to take the classes.
You basically hacked your career before you were even a hacker, it feels like.
Yeah, a little bit. It was always trying to figure out how to make things work and how to go on from there and finding out what was going to be that next step. Because even all of that kind of thing that I did was like one of the best jobs that I had. Extremely well-paid job for being somebody in his late 20s, touring around the country and being able to see all kinds of great things. One of my favorite things was often to stick around for the weekend in between jobs and go to different sporting games and things. I remember one weekend being able to go to a Dodgers and an Angels game on different days just because I was spending the weekend in LA. So it was a whole lot of fun. But you probably remember somewhere around 2001, the dot-com bubble burst. And one of the first things to go anytime that people lose their money is the training budget, especially if you're a contractor doing training, if you're an outside doing training. So I quickly lost the job there. It was probably just a couple months after I bought a house too. So that was extremely scary. And that put me right back to square one. Had to kind of start all over again. It took me about 9 months to finally find a job. So I went from teaching Java programming for Sun Microsystems to developers, taking a job at not Harvard, but another local university where they needed somebody to teach Microsoft Office products to their executive admins. So basically, I was then saying, here's what Microsoft Word is. Here's what Excel is. Let's build some front page web pages, if anybody remembers building sites in front page. So that was a little bit of a change, but again, it kind of paid the bills. So that was a little bit of a transition there as well.
Yeah. And so how did you go from that to cybersecurity?
That's a great question, because one of the things that I always do or try to do in my career is I always try to find the gaps. I always try to find like what's sort of missing in what people need. So really from there, where I went from teaching people what a table cell is in Excel and how to make text bold in Microsoft Word, to one day when a project came up at the university and they were like, who knows, we need somebody for this professor project who knows PHP. And of course, if you're the adventurous type, you're going to raise your hand, whether you know it or not. I figured I knew Java, I knew C++ a little bit. Sure, how much different can PHP be? So I got put onto that project. What that eventually led to was me being able to assist in helping build websites for the university. So I would go around to all the different departments in the university and help them with their websites, being able to build them or help other people that were in those departments to build the sites, to the point where the system administrators at the university were like, I don't really want to deal with these. I don't want to be creating accounts. I don't want to doing password resets for these people. And you're already in there working with them. Is that something that you want? And I was like, yep, that's an area that I will do. If you want to give me administrative rights on the web server, I will take that, which I thought was pretty cool that I was able to jump in and do those sorts of things as well. So it's kind of neat being able to just work my way up and get the, administrative pseudo rights, all that kind of stuff, to the point where eventually you start looking around and finding different configuration things and wondering, is this the right way to do it? But I think what really opened my eyes one day was somebody mentioned that there was a security conference happening in Boston. I was like, cool, let's go check that out, because it was really web-based. I believe it was an OWASP conference. So if you're not familiar with OWASP, it's the Open Web Application Security Project. And I still remember the presentation where I was sitting in the room and somebody demonstrated live on whatever their site was with SQL injection. And I'm like, my mind was blown. I'm like, this is incredible. So that's all you have to do is just put that little bit of code into the browser somewhere and you can get full access to the database. And he even took it further and he was able to get himself a reverse shell with it. I'm like, I had no idea what any of this stuff was, but I knew that day I need to do that. So I think from that point forward, I started working to replicate what I saw there and went back to the university and started finding all these different vulnerabilities for SQL injection and other types of injection things that were there and building from there, making myself, that security pain in the neck person. I also had a little bit of a lucky advantage where the chief security officer for the university, his office was right next to my cube. And he and I shared an interest in baseball and hockey. So I'd sometimes just pop into his office and start talking about the ball game or the hockey game from the night before. And then every so often I'd be like, hey, did you also notice that there's this sort of problem going on? We have this sort of vulnerability. And he and I would talk through some of those types of things and be able to figure out what to do. But then the real big break happened on a Friday afternoon at 4:30. The entire web server went down. And we're like, what's going on? Well, why is that not running? We finally got it back up. And what the CSO said when it got back up is, I am making this your task to figure out what happened, how we can avoid it, and what we can do going forward with that. So when he made that my task to figure it out, I just started digging in. I didn't really have any kind of great idea of what it was. But then one of the things that we were able to find was we started finding some web shells on the web server. And the more that I dug, the more that I looked into each department site, I was finding a new web shell in basically every department. And so many of them were different. I was trying to figure out, was this like one attacker that did this? Was this multiple attackers? And I think what we figured out was the entire web server was compromised by so many different web shells. And what the web shells were there for was anytime that Google indexed our server, and since this was like a university, it's getting indexed all the time. It has great reputation with Google. It's going to be trusting all types of things. But what the web shells did is they created these htaccess files so that when Google hit it, it redirected off to the attacker's own pages in sites that were hidden. And those were for your fake Rolex and all those other types of things that the attackers want you to see. But anybody that would just try to access any of those things directly through a browser, the htaccess file would say no and push you off to the correct part of the site. So they were really hard to see. And what we eventually kind of figured out was that it had been so compromised. There were so many of these shells, so many of the redirects, that when Google hit it, it was basically Google that was DOSing the site. So it just became overwhelmed from Google hitting, instead of just Google, coming through the front door and hitting the www and following the paths, it was hitting all kinds of different shells, hitting all different sites and going all over the place to the point where the web server couldn't handle it anymore. And this was well before the days of ensuring that you had redundancy and all that. It was just a standalone web server for the university. So that was kind of interesting. And I had so much fun with that. I actually still have all those web shells. I thought it was like the coolest thing being able to keep them. So I have the full collection. Some of them were pretty neat. I'm sure some of them are backdoored, so I'm always careful with those as well. But just some of them in the way that they were hidden, some of them had passwords on them. Some of them were super basic one-liners. Others were great tools. I remember some of the server admins thinking like, well, I'm going to use that as a server tool just because there's so much good functionality in there. And I thought, well, this was so much fun for me to learn and to pick apart. I'm going to turn this into a conference presentation. So I did that, made it into a presentation and started presenting that at a few different places. I remember one of the places was at the, I think, Boston College Security Camp was my first ever presentation that I gave. Had so much fun with it. It was similar to being able to stand up and teach in front of a classroom. So I felt like I was okay with the public speaking skills a little bit, but that was my first explaining things in IT, explaining things in security that I was able to do and share with that. And also, while I was at the university, I was fortunate that I was working side by side with Paul Asadorian. So if you're not familiar with Paul, maybe you've heard of Paul.com or Security Weekly and his podcast. That's where that is from. And I told him, I'm trying to make this transition from doing websites and IT into the security space. And he said, I need an intern. Why don't you come over? Which I thought was the greatest thing. So I got to hang out in Paul's offices for about 3 months, learning about all new things in the security space, just being around him, being around Larry and Jack and all the other people that were on there. And I remember even the very first day when I got there, Paul says to me, okay, what we're going to do is you need to learn about CSRF and you're going to present on our show about it. And at that point, I'm like, I don't even know what CSRF is. So I had to go Google what is CSRF and go to some other people. I'm like, do you know what this is? And them having to say, yeah, you can go find it on the OWASP pages. So that was a whole lot of fun being able to dig in and create my own proof of concept and how cross-site request forgery works and being able to demo that on the show. So that was another great learning angle to be able to deepen the types of skills that I had. And I think it was a combination of the presentation that I was giving on the denial of service attack that happened in the university, being able to have the experience and being out there with working with Paul as the intern, that one day out of the blue, Akamai called. And they said, we want you to be on our incident response team with the web team. I'm like, I was feeling like this is crazy. Like I'd been at the university and been, a university job's kind of pretty great. It's pretty stable. You don't really have a whole lot to worry about. There's very rarely, if ever, going to be cuts or anything like that there. The benefits are incredible. And then Akamai calls and wants to completely change your world going into the security space, which was exactly the direction that I wanted to go. I didn't know that I could do it, but eventually I'm like, I'll take the leap. So I get to go work for Akamai Technologies. And if you're not familiar with them, the little tagline that I like to use is, if you've been on the internet today, chances are you've touched an Akamai server.
Yeah. They're basically the Cloudflare of their day.
Absolutely. And I've made that claim to a couple other people. And they're like, that sounds dubious. Just because I've been on the internet, I've touched an Akamai server. I'm like, yep, you probably have. So that was kind of fun, where I got to work at Akamai behind their web application firewall for their clients for about 3 years, which was really neat because, they were at that time the main DDoS protection for all the biggest companies. This was when all those different anonymous operations were happening, Op Wall Street and all those types of things. And they were taking down all the big Fortune 10 companies. Akamai was the one that was jumping in and protecting all of those assets. So I was there working, watching all the web application firewall alerts coming through, seeing what were going to be those different types of attacks. So if, for example, we saw one type of attack hitting Bank of America, we'd be able to document all that. We could then go to our other financial customers and say, Bank of America got hit with this, which we stopped. So the chances are those are going to be coming at you next. Let's turn on your firewall rules for those types of things. So I got to get a whole bunch of experience while I was there as well. And at the same time, I had also, like I mentioned earlier, been to an OWASP meeting up in Boston, and I was living down in Rhode Island. So on a good day with almost no traffic, it's about an hour ride for me to get to those meetings at 7:00 at night. And typically it's probably going to be closer to 2 hours. And at the end of the day, you don't want to go for a 2-hour ride just to head up to a meeting. So I mentioned that to a friend, like, this is a pain. He's like, why don't you build your own then? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, build your own meetup and see how that goes. I'm like, I got no idea how to do that. He's like, figure it out. So I did. I created my own OWASP group. I built the OWASP Rhode Island. And really, the advice that I give to people now who want to do those types of things is I tell them, really, all you need is a space and a speaker. So as long as you have that, you have a meeting group. And I figured I can put these things together where I'm going to bring in experts to talk about topics that I'm interested in so I can learn from them. And if other people want to show up, that's great too. I remember at the very first meeting, I had reserved the back room at a restaurant and a bar, but they double booked it for their trivia night. So we had to sit just off in the corner of a bar with, I think, 4 attendees, which was all people that I worked with, and this one speaker who was ready to give a presentation. I'm probably scared the heck out of him seeing the kind of mess that we went with that one. But that really built from there. And I was able to have monthly OWASP Rhode Island meetings. And again, that was a way that I was able to learn a whole lot more about web application security. I did that for a few years, being able to grow the group to a few hundred people, which was fun, until eventually we realized, I feel like we've talked about just about every possible web application security topic that there is among people in our area. And there's often other topics that we want to address that aren't web application specific. Can't really do that with OWASP. So I decided then the DEF CON 401 group had been dissolved or walked away. And I found the original creators of that group and got their blessing to bring that back. And instead of running OWASP, I decided I was going to run the DEF CON 401 group, which then you can talk about anything. You can talk about making, breaking, any type of security. Ran that for a few years as well. So that was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, and nicely leads into my next question, which is so a lot of people on this podcast often emphasize like the value of networking, and obviously networking definitely helped you land a bunch of opportunities. But what practical advice do you have for newcomers to build relationships in the cybersecurity community and network?
Yeah, that's the advice that I always give to people when they're first starting out, because I'll have people come to me and say, I have the college degree, I have the certifications, nobody's looking at my resume. And I ask them like, well, what else have you done? And they just kind of look at me silly. I'm like, no, you really need to do the human networking. You need to do the face-to-face. And I explained to them, I'm like, well, you sent in your resume and you're not getting a response. Look at it from the other perspective. Look at it from the HR. They probably got hundreds of resumes. And they're probably handing off some number of good ones. Maybe yours was sent to the hiring manager, but there's another good pile that goes off to the hiring manager. Now, if you're that manager and you have, let's say, 10 good resumes, and you know 2 of the people on there and you don't know 8 of them, and you know that you don't want to make a bad hire, you want to get somebody you trust, you're probably going to say, well, I know these 2 people, and I know one of them's a little bit flaky and the other one's really good. Who do you think they're going to hire? They're probably going to bring in that one person that they know and they trust. Yeah. So how do you get to be that person? You go to these events. You can either volunteer at a B-Sides. That's a way to get there. You can present at conferences. At least get out there, get to know people, get to meet them. So that way in the future, they'll know your face, they'll know your name. And when these job opportunities do come up, you're going to go to the top of the list there. So the human networking, the face-to-face is hugely important. And I know so many of us in this field are introverts and hate meeting people, but that's kind of the way it is. That's what you have to do.
Yeah. And if you're super introverted, you can just, create an account on X and just shitpost all day. And that's how I do it.
I don't know anybody who does that. That's pretty much me too.
Legitimately got several jobs that way somehow. So yeah, don't recommend it.
Or, like I said, you build your own meetup group where you don't have to be the one. You just introduce them and then you ditch. You build a conference where you bring in all the speakers and then you just kind of stand in the back and people think, oh, that person must know something because they built this. No, not really. I just decided to go build a meetup group and a conference, and that works too.
That's awesome. So obviously with Akamai, you were more sort of blue team. I think you were incident response, right? That was your official title. So how did you gravitate towards pen testing? What attracted you to the more offensive side of security?
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. So yeah, while I was at Akamai, I had, made those contacts, been out in the community. And one of my friends, Mike Perez, also known as Intern Mike, was working at Black Hills Information Security at the time. And he contacted me. He's like, hey, we got a need for a little bit of side work doing web application pen testing. And I told him, no, I'm on the blue team. I do defending. I've never done offensive work. He was like, you can do it. I'm like, I don't know if I can. He's like, try. I'm like, okay. So I gave that a shot. And it was so much fun. I was having so much fun when they'd give me a website and I got to do all these different things that I'd heard about and learned about with the OWASP types of things. And I'm like, this is great. So I kept getting more and more work with that. And I think one of the other super fun jobs that I got through Black Hills working on the side was a social engineering job. I remember this was really early on, where it was a company that had given me 50 names and phone numbers. And I was like, how do I do this? What do you guys want me to do? And everybody was like, see what you can do, see what you can get. I'm like, all right, let's have some fun with this. So really what I did was I created my own site that looked like that company's login, where, put it behind HTTPS. So everything was encrypted and everything, and just wrote the login to a file for me. And then I called people up at that company. And let me just say up front that this pretext is not one that I would do today, only because it just causes alarm and concern with people to a degree that could potentially cause issues within a company. So really what I did was I was calling people around 4 p.m. on I can't remember which day of the week. And I'd call them up and I'd say, hey, we found out that we got breached. some number of our usernames and passwords got breached, and it's probably going to be showing up in the news at some time. So I got tasked with calling to figure out whose is and is not in that. And the way that we figured that out is that we have this site that if you go to it and you log in, after you log in, it'll tell you whether yours was in there. So I would get people to go there and I would tell them it's at this IP address because we haven't even had time to set up a domain for it yet. So if you just go to this IP address, and of course, the page looked just like any regular login page for the company. And if they were to log in, it would tell them, don't worry, your credentials are not in the breach. You have nothing to worry about. So I figured it's not going to set off any kind of alarms with that. And I think I got like a 64% hit rate on it. I'm like, this is so much fun. This is incredible. But, it was probably about 10 years ago or so that I did that. Social engineering has come so much further. Awareness has gotten so much better. And I was having fun doing that kind of work for Black Hills to the point where intern Mike came back to me. It was like, we have a little bit more side work. Do you know anybody else that would do this? And I went to one of my colleagues at Akamai and I said, do you want to do it? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. I'm like, cool. So I put him in touch. And then the next day he comes to me and said, I went to the Akamai HR and I asked permission to do side work. And they said, no. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You did that. You asked permission from HR if we can do this work on our own time for a different company. And they said, no. He's like, yeah, so I can't do it. Well, at that point, I realized, well, if they told you no, and I'm aware that they told you no, I can't keep doing this or I'm going to get fired. Because I'd mentioned it, I think, to the managers in my department. And they were like, yeah, we're cool with it. It's all good with that. But once we found out HR said no, well, that really puts an end to that. But it turned out that I liked doing the offensive security part more than the defensive security. So I started making phone calls to, again, my contacts in the industry, people that I had met. And I made a call to one company and asked, do you have any openings for penetration testers? And they said, yes, we do. So I got to interview for a job at Rapid7, which was a whole lot of fun as well, largely because, you've heard my background pretty much through this, where I came from sports medicine. I came from learning programming. I came from building websites. You really haven't heard anything where I did network administration, system administration, Active Directory. And it's true, my whole time that I was working at the university and working at Akamai, I had a Mac laptop. So I really knew nothing about Windows. And in my technical interview that I had with Rapid7, I still to this day am not completely sure why they hired me. The technical interviewer, the first question was, okay, you're going to do an internal network pen test. Walk me through your methodology. And I told him, I can't. And he's like, no, really? That's a funny joke. Really, tell me what your methodology is going to be. I'm like, honestly, I don't know. You say these words, Active Directory and things. I don't know what those are. And he's like, okay, let's talk through your web application. And we went off from there. No problems. So somehow I still got hired. Jumped in with the pen test team at Rapid7, got to do a whole lot of web application testing work there. And I remember later on when that manager who did the technical interview with me was actually leaving Rapid7, and I asked him, I'm like, what did you think when we did that technical interview and why did you still recommend me for hiring? And he said, it was because you didn't lie. I didn't try to snowball my way through the interview. When he asked about those things, I just told him straight up, I don't know. And he said, that made me seem like somebody that's going to be pretty straightforward and honest and ethical, which is exactly what you want with penetration testing. And I did well enough with the web application part. So that was what got me a job at Rapid7 doing pen testing, which was a whole lot of fun. That opened up my world to so many things where there was just an amazing team there. I think we had about 30 or 40 different pen testers at the time over my career of about 6 years at Rapid7, where the testers there were amazing, where we had people that were analysts just starting out all the way up to the most experienced principal, consultant, researchers, people that find the most amazing vulnerabilities. So being able to work with that team was just incredible and be able to learn so much. When you get a team that big, you can eventually pick your spots to find the people that know specific things and glom onto them until you learn more about it. And I remember, since I knew nothing about Active Directory, I would gradually build my way through learning how all of those types of attacks would work. One of the things that, if you're not familiar with the way that pen test companies work, is quite often after the report is written, there's this thing on the team, which is an internal peer review. So the report usually needs to be read by somebody else on the team just for technicals and anything like that. And I would make sure that anytime some of these pen tests would come through that I didn't know how to do, I would always jump right on that peer review. Even if I wasn't somebody that understood it, I'd still be reading it for my own learning, my own understanding of a lot of these techniques, and then writing down some of the things that I would see that they would do so I could remember how to do them when it was my turn. And now I have files of like 3,000 something lines of different tips and tricks that I use all the time in my pen testing. But even just reading some of those reports wasn't enough. I remember when I was finally getting assigned to do the internal pen tests and kind of get an idea a little bit, I started off just by shadowing people on my own. Like I would get assigned a web application test, but I would also go find somebody doing an internal and be like, show me how you did XYZ that was in the report that you did before. And they'd show me those things. But when I finally got assigned to somebody that was more experienced, more senior, I remember I tried this the first time or a few times. I'm like, how about you take the week off? You let me do everything. You can do whatever you want. Just be available to me to answer questions when I get stuck. For the first few, they were kind of the types of people that just really loved doing the testing and had to get their hands in there and weren't happy until they were able to do their own privilege escalation. I was like, okay, this isn't really the way that I'm going to learn this the best. So one of the things that I finally found was one of the guys on the team, his name's Leon Johnson, online, he's show love, one of the greatest guys. And I said to our scheduling manager, I'm like, what I need you to do is I need you to put me on site with Leon somewhere for an internal. And I said, we'll send you to LA. So here I am in Rhode Island, flying over to Los Angeles to do an internal network pen test with Leon. And I remember the guy's the greatest for teaching. On day one, when we're sitting in the bank's offices, probably around 8, 9 in the morning, he's just looking at me. He's like, we're not going home until we have DA. I'm like, what do you mean? What if it's not possible? He's like, no. We're not leaving until we get this. So it was the most amazing thing, just being able to sit with him, seeing him fly through it all. But the best was that he was like, okay, here's how I did it. I went through all of these steps. Now, based on what I just told you, you go do it. And that's really how I learned, was sitting with him showing me how to do it, him having me do it, and of course, me taking the notes to be able to replicate it and being able to build from there. So that was really the way that I was able to build my career, was being able to work with other people. And I've also tried to really make sure that I do the same thing for others, that anybody that wants to see anything that I'm ever able to do, I'm more than happy to walk them through it as well. So that's kind of the way that I've gotten into the offensive security area of my career.
That's awesome. Yeah, when I was working back in the UK, and I went on site with my friend Andy, who I now have a podcast with. Our rule wasn't you can't go home until you get DA. Ours was a bit more extreme. It was you can't have lunch until you get DA. So there were a few days where we like have lunch at like 2 p.m. because so it's like, oh god. But it's a really good motivator.
Yeah. Well, even getting on a day one by 2 p.m. is pretty impressive too.
Yeah, this was back when it was like, honestly, you just half the time you could just run MSO8 67 against the domain controller.
Yep.
It was just like, oh yeah, here's the shell as admin. Great, thank you.
Yep. Or you'd set up responder to the relay and like, okay, it's 9:03. Let's go get coffee. I got DA. Yep.
Yeah.
Go grab a Red
those
Bull.
are the days. Now we have to use Bloodhound. Well, I say we. I don't do internal testing anymore.
Yeah, I'm really noticing that the ADCS, the certificate services, is almost the new Eternal Blue, where most people are vulnerable to it one way or another.
Yeah, for sure. It's a whole new world with pen testing now. It's great. That I probably won't ever get into. I hate internal stuff. I'm just happy with web apps. Give me all the web apps. It's all good.
Yeah, I started out doing so many web apps, but I don't know about you. It just really feels like companies are doing a much better job with web apps. And the things that I find is either it's really locked down or it feels like a CTF. It just feels like it's one way or the other, where it has everything or it has nothing.
I think it's shifted. Like, yeah, you get the occasional test where there's like literally everything. And with frameworks now, it's a lot better. But I think where a lot of the issues have shifted is now access control is still a complete nightmare because nobody knows how to do access control properly. And then business logic stuff. So a lot of just even like MFA bypasses are technically kind of business logic. So yeah, there's still a bunch of fun stuff. I think it's more like puzzle solving now than it was in the past. So I do like that about it.
And how much more of it are you seeing with the web applications that's on the server side? Like a lot of the things that James Kettle is pointing out.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, James's research is insane. Request smuggling it's the gift that keeps on giving. Yeah, so I think that's probably going to be the next thing, or it's going to be around for a while now because HTTP 1.1 is not going away anytime soon.
And the poor web developers are like, we solved SQL injection. We got rid of the cross-site scripting. Like, This isn't our fault.
They got rid of cross-site scripting and then like templates came in and then reintroduced cross-site scripting. Now you have CSTI, which is all over the place as well. So that's kind of fun. It's every single modern technology. Like we thought we got rid of command injection. There were years that went by where nobody was getting like actual command injection, even from like SQL injection. And then suddenly someone had the great idea to create server-side templates for like modern web applications using basically just, I don't know, a templating language which for some reason could access all the commands from whatever programming language it was using. So it's like, oh, okay, and there we go, command injection's back. So yeah, it's every single technology, I think, that gets created for web apps. It seems amazing and then ultimately just completely falls over and is like full of vulnerabilities, full of holes. I think we're seeing the same thing with AI as well, right? So like LLMs are amazing, but completely insecure, and there are so many ways of bypassing them and bypassing the safeguards. So yeah, it's always going to be interesting.
And the web app guys that I work with, they seem to be finding SSRF more often now as well. That was one that I didn't find very often, and now it seems like once a month they're showing that one.
That's pretty popular. Yeah, it's fun as well. It's interesting what you can do with it. I think a lot of people don't realize there's like even blind SSRF is useful in terms of you can like literally port scan an entire network like at the back end. It's pretty fun. So yeah, there's a few things you can do with it, but yeah, it's quite good. We're going to be fine. I think our jobs are safe for now.
Yep. As long as we can get at least another 10 years, I'm good.
Yeah. So you spoke about it briefly, but you have become particularly passionate about social engineering. What skills make someone successful at social engineering? What are the best ways to develop those skills?
Yeah, I've really gotten into the social engineering aspect. And I can also talk a little bit about how I got there as well. Where, remember earlier, I also said that I look for the gaps and look for the needs at a company. And one of the things that I noticed when I was working on the team at Rapid7 is that it seemed like most of the people on the team loved doing the physical social engineering covert entry types of break-ins. But for some reason, very few people liked doing the phishing or liked doing the phone calls. So again, I just raised my hand and said, I'll go learn how to do those, which I was having a whole lot of fun with those types of attacks. I mentioned the one for Black Hills, making phishing phone call types of things as well. So I was having fun with that and being able to build my skills there. But what types of things make somebody good at it, or how do you practice it? It's really tough in order for somebody to learn to be a social engineer, so it seems. Or one of the things that I really like to describe to people, or I ask in a lot of my presentations, is who are the best social engineers that we know? And lots of names will sometimes come up, but the answer that I like to give is our kids. And just think how easily our kids know how to social engineer us. If your child starts asking for ice cream and you're like, no, I'm not going to give you ice cream, and they just kind of give you that face and like, please, I'll be good. And like, okay, take your ice cream. They just social engineered you. They know how you work. They've figured out how that is going to go. So basically, we all are always doing some degree of social engineering. And I think, unfortunately, too many people see social engineering as manipulation. They see it as something bad. Or they're like, well, if I'm going to go learn social engineering, what information do I need to get from somebody? And for me, that's really like the wrong way to look at it, where I often just describe social engineering as communication. We need to be able to talk to people. And if you want to get better at it, go make yourself uncomfortable talking to people, because chances are, if you're somebody that is already an outgoing and extrovert and you're used to talking to people, social engineering is easy. You might not even know it. Like lots of times when I talk to OSINT people and like, oh, I was doing investigations long before we even called it OSINT. And then somebody used that term with me. I had no idea that's what it was. And for extroverts, social engineering is probably the same thing. So what I usually tell people in order to get better at it is just go talk to somebody, go start up a conversation. Maybe that's going to be in the grocery store. Like one of the rules that we put on, talking to somebody new is it can't be somebody who's paid to require to talk to you. So like the hotel desk person, you walk up to them, of course they're going to talk to you. The bartender, they're of course going to talk to you. So make it a little bit harder at least. Maybe it's somebody on the sidewalk. Maybe it's somebody in the aisle at the grocery store. And just start a conversation with them. Just start talking to them about anything at all. And if you really want to gamify it and try to get information, try to get their first name. Try to get what town they're from. Try to get their last name. Try to get what their date of birth is. And I know sometimes this can sound a little bit difficult. Like, how do I go into the grocery store and find out what is somebody's date of birth? And it's really just to kind of be about thinking your way around the problem, what types of things that you're going to talk about. And that's where we can also learn more about some of these rapport techniques or influence techniques, things where you can share information with them first, where people are going to be more likely to give you information back. Because maybe you're in the birthday card aisle at the grocery store and you start talking to them about birthdays and your birthday's coming up and your kid's birthday is coming up. And you can also disarm people if they're of the opposite gender from you by mentioning your spouse. So if you're really concerned that the person that you speak to is going to think that you're hitting on them in some way, you can kind of disarm them with that sort of thing. Like, I'm looking for a card for my wife, and you can kind of get information from them in that direction. I remember I had a little light bulb moment go on for myself one time when I would always give people this advice to go talk in this way in order to have these conversations. And then the light bulb went on for me one time when I was getting takeout dinner from a restaurant. And I remember as I was signing the check to get it, the person that was working there looking up a TV inside the restaurant, and there was a commercial for a Jeep on there. And she's like, I'd really like to have one of those Jeeps one day. And normally in my introverted ways, I would just go like, cool, and hand over the check. But the bulb went on. I'm like, this is my moment. This is the type of conversation that I'm looking for. And I kind of looked up and I'm like, oh, is that this model, this brand of Jeep? And she's like, yeah, it is. I'm like, what types of things would you do in that Jeep? She's like, well, my boyfriend used to have one, and we'd go on weekends and we'd go all off-roading with it. And we really loved it. We'd get it really muddy. I'm like, what types of places? That's also something I'm interested in. I would love to go off-roading. Where are some great places to go? Well, you got to go to these roads. You got to go to these towns. And it was just that type of conversation, being able to get more information, where when I walked out of there, I know what kind of Jeep that she likes. I know where she likes to go. And of course, none of this was intended to be malicious. It wasn't going to be stalking or anything like that. The whole point of what I was trying to do was to open up a conversation to get information that you might not normally do and just get more comfortable with those conversations. So anytime somebody says, how do I get to be a social engineer? My initial answer is go have some conversations with strangers that would normally make you uncomfortable.
That's a really good tip. I remember now, like the last day of DEF CON this year, I went to the social engineering village and they had their cold calls. So these are basically it's not the phishing competition. Or the vishing competition, I guess. So it's people don't know their targets ahead of time. These are just honestly people from the audience just go in the booth. They call usually some kind of, I think it was a commercial store. I think a Foot Locker was called. And they just have to ask 3 like random questions that are all about, they don't get specific details about like username, password or anything like serious, because obviously that would probably be kind of illegal, but they just ask like saying, oh, does your store use security cameras and are they connected to the internet, stuff like that. But that, I think that reminds me of what you were just saying, because that is literally, these people often just sign up on the day. They weren't expecting to do it. Maybe they just came to the social engineering village the day before and saw it was happening. But yeah, it's kind of like that. It's putting yourself in a situation where you're talking with a stranger on the phone, obviously, and then you're asking them questions you wouldn't usually ask, and it's kind of odd. And yeah, but a lot of the time it's very successful because they are usually quite tame questions, even though they are unusual for someone just calling into the store to ask.
And asking them, trying to get information that might otherwise seem innocuous. And that's usually a great way to try to talk your way around it. I remember when I started doing this, thinking to myself, there's no way I'll ever get somebody to tell me their password over the phone, because we always hear, never give your password out to somebody over the phone. I remember the first time it happened where somebody actually did tell me their password over the phone. I'm like, I can't believe this works. This is just amazing. And I can tell you that if as long as you have a pretext that is going to make sense and you get the right person, I can tell you that it was like 1 in 1,000. But like I tell people, if you have one username, one password, that's all you need to get through a VPN. It doesn't matter that the other 999 shot you down. As long as you can get that one, you can get in. And you would think like it should be impossible to get somebody's password over the phone, but it's not. You certainly can do it if you have the right pretext, the right backstory, as long as everything makes sense. So that it can be done.
I also saw a stat the other day that something like 70% of all breaches have some kind of social engineering aspect at the start to get a foothold, which is, I want to say it's crazy, but it isn't that crazy of a stat. Like it does make sense, especially with how well protected a lot of the external infrastructure is these days. But yeah, people forget the weakest component is always the human.
Yeah, I know that we're doing a whole lot better with phishing protection, where we have defense in depth with phishing, and people are so much more aware of what phishing is. And fortunately, we have those protections so that even if somebody does click a link or download something, there's protections in place. And one of the things that I was seeing in the most recent Verizon DBIR is that social engineering angle is really shifting to phone calls. People being able to speak to somebody is going to be a lot more impactful than just an email. So that social engineering angle that you just mentioned, where that's 70%, I think the phishing, the phone call part of it, is going to be a huge part of that now and going forward for the short term, or maybe the long term, until we figure out how to do that, which I guess is just don't answer the phone, which doesn't work in some instances.
Yeah. So for someone wanting to break into pen testing or even social engineering today, what do you think are the foundational skills that you consider most important?
For somebody that wants to break into offensive security, the advice that I'm always giving to people is that you need to learn how to build before you can break. And I like to ask people, let's say you needed to tear down a huge building, and you have two options. These are the only two options that you have. You have the really huge, strong guy with a sledgehammer, or you have the architect who built the blueprints for that building. Which one do you think is going to be more efficient at getting that building down? Now, that guy with a sledgehammer, he can swing all day, and chances are eventually it's going to come down. But that architect who drew the blueprints knows exactly where every weakness is for that building. And that architect is going to be able to say, well, if we just poke that right there, that's probably going to take everything down much more easily and more efficiently. And I tell people it's the same thing with pen testing. You need to be that architect who drew up the blueprints. And how do you do that is usually through one of three areas. And for me, that is either to be a network administrator, where you learn all the Cisco stuff with all the switches and everything else that they do and know those types of things inside and out. Or you be a system administrator, where you sit down and you run the entire network, whether that's Active Directory or any of the other networks that are being used for companies. Or you be a web application developer, whether that's building web apps, mobile apps, anything like that. You need to learn how to build those things. So that way, when you're on the other side, you understand how it all came together. You understand what are a lot of those common misconfigurations. And as you're learning to build, you often learn, don't do those things. And what you find is a lot of the clients, when you're pen testing, do those things that you learned, don't do those. So like for SQL injection, we know that we don't just take a parameter from the URL and send that straight to the database. That's going to lead to SQL injection. We know don't do that. But we also know some people do that. So we've learned that's going to be an area that we want to test. So when people say, I'm going to college and I want to be a pen tester next year, I'm like, well, good luck. Maybe you can do that sort of thing, but my advice is to get your feet wet building something first. And one of those three areas, and there's probably others as well, especially with AI coming up, where people can learn how to build certain things. Or if you don't want to go in one of those, there's always the other types of areas. Things like help desk, service desk are certainly a great way. Working in a security operations center or a SOC, where you're going to be able to see so many different things happening. You're going to be able to see all the alerts, going to be able to see all the attacks and learn how those types of things work as well. And I know that's not really a happy answer that people want to hear. Like when you hear like, well, I'm 22, I want to be a pen tester, I got my OSCP, can I do it? And it's like, well, if you're asking for my advice, this is going to be the direction that I suggest that you go in, is going to be with one of those. As far as learning to be a social engineer, I'm not really aware of too many companies that only do social engineering. My awareness of how you get to do that stuff is you join one of the pen test teams that does social engineering jobs, and you're just able to shadow your way in and gradually pick up on those skills. And if you're able to take some of those areas that other people don't want to do, because for some reason, lots of pen testers don't like doing the phone calls, you can jump right on those. You can jump on the phishing engagements and just make sure that they're all done ethically. And by ethically, I mean in a way that is going to make yourself either seem invisible to the target so that they never think of you again. I was even doing phone calls just this morning and ending some of the calls when I got completely busted with an okay, thank you, have a nice day, hoping that I would just walk away invisible, or making it a good engagement for the person, making them feel happy with the direction that things went. So that's usually the ways that I suggest that people get into it.
That's great. Yeah, no, I agree. So this is like almost like a controversial follow-up, I guess. It's something that I ask a lot. And obviously for web application, like if you're a web app dev, you do know how to code. But if you're a sysadmin, you might not, know coding that well. You might know scripting, right? PowerShell or Bash. But how important are things like coding and even like certs for someone new to cybersecurity?
Okay, so we got coding and we have certs, and we'll handle those two things separately. So for coding, you do not need to be a master coder or anything like that. I learned, like I mentioned early on, C++, Java, PHP, probably some others as well. And there are going to be times where it helps if you can throw something together. I remember really early in my career, one of my favorite interview questions that I learned from somebody is asking a developer, are you lazy? And seeing what their answer is. Because the answer to that is yes. You do want to be lazy, because if you have to do something over and over and over again, be lazy about it, script it. Make it so that you don't have to do it over and over and over again. And that's really one of the things that often happens with pen testing, is there are times that I need to cycle through hundreds or thousands of IPs and check something on them. So I just kind of write a real quick Bash script or Python script or anything like that for it. I'm not somebody that's going to claim that I could build an entire application anymore in any of these languages. But if you need something like that thrown together, I could do that. So I would say, if you got a couple days that you want to go through and learn a scripting language and be able to do some basic scripts, learn some loops, anything like that, that's going to be extremely helpful. Now, certifications, for me, these are only important to get through the HR filters. That there are companies that do want to see these, but in order to get through that HR filter, they're going to be looking for that CPTS. They're going to be looking for the OSCP. Where what to me is going to be even more important is that you have the experience, because those certifications don't give you the experience to do the job. I remember when I was going through and learning the pen test with Cali for the OSCP certification, it was myself and a small group of people that were studying for it. I already had a job at Rapid7 at the time when I was studying for the OSCP. But the group of people that I was studying with was your typical post-college students who had never done it before, and they were getting the certification so that they could get a pen test job. And I remember after we all finished and all passed the exam, we were still in contact. And I remember talking to a couple of them like 6 to 9 months after they got their first pen test job and asking them, how much did that entire PWK OSCP prepare you for the actual job? And they were like, not at all. They were like, it's probably about 20%. Now, granted, when I did it and when they did it, it was before OffSec changed into the Active Directory world. So back then it was just individual boxes, which made it so much different for all of us. And they were like, no, not at all. So And I was even having a conversation just recently with somebody else on LinkedIn about this. One of the things that is very different from those certifications to the real world is when you are in that Hack the Box or PWK Cali existence and you're going through it, you know those boxes are vulnerable. Now you might get stuck, but you're like, I have to keep going because there's a vulnerability somewhere. But when you're a pen tester and they give you hundreds or thousands of IPs, for one, you don't have time to test every single one. And for two, they might not be vulnerable. So you have to really learn where the vulnerabilities are, what specifically to look for, and when to move on. So those certifications can certainly help you to build those skills. But again, when you have those skills and also when you have that human networking, again, when the hiring managers know who you are, know what you can do, and they can trust you, to me, that's what's going to be far more valuable.
Yeah, I think I've raised that point myself about you don't know if something's vulnerable or not in the real world. And that's incredible. It's such a different mindset as well. It's like I like comparing it to like bug bounty mindset versus pen tester mindset because they are almost basically completely different. And anyone who's shifted from bug bounty into pen testing, I think understands that. But there's also just a time limit on the OSCP, which is insane. And then the fact that you can't use like tools, like basically any tools. It's like,
right.
It's just not a realistic exam anymore. Well, it never was, I guess. But it's kind of annoying how it became the poster child for pen test certs. I mean, there was a point in time when we took it when 25% of the points were buffer overflow. You had to code a buffer overflow, something that no pen tester has ever done on any pen test ever.
That's right.
I don't understand why that was. And granted, now it's not in the exam, which is good. But it was like, but why?
And the steps for the exam were exactly the same as in the practice. And you could even pre-write your report to just drop in the screenshots later on because you knew these are the steps that I'm going to have to do. And I remember taking the exam and like 30 minutes in, having the buffer overflow done, like, cool, there's 25 points. That was just silly that you know is going to be there. You know exactly where it is. You know exactly how it works. And even to your point about the time limits, and have you ever been on a pen test where they say you can only use Metasploit once? No, never. But
yeah, I kind of do get why they do it. At the same time, it's just ridiculous. And I mean, at least now there is an Active Directory component, but even still, it's kind of a little silly. Oh well. And one thing I discussed this with Andy on my other podcast because we talked about social engineering once. That it dawned on me there really isn't a social engineering exam, and if you think about it, there really can't be because you can't test social engineering in the same way because you have the target you have to be lying to, and if they're a target that's like an examiner, then they know they're being lied to. So it's like, it's weird. But the thing is, it also dawned to me about 5 minutes later in the podcast. Well, actually, the social engineering village's vishing competition at DEF CON is basically as close as you can get, I think, to an exam. Because it does use real targets. And it's not a good exam because it's completely unfair because it really does depend on who you get given. But I was just thinking about it, like, that's pretty much, if you want to like demonstrate your skills in a controlled environment, as controlled an environment as you can get, the social engineering village's vishing competition is probably the only place you can actually do it.
Or the other way that you could do it is if you could get permission from somebody to do a test on their people. So let's say that you got a company to say, yes, you can do phishing, covert entry, social engineering against our people. So basically, they're hiring you to do a pen test. And then if you, as the certifying agency company, trust the students to do it right, you can set them loose on that company and see how they do with it and potentially certify people based on that. Which again, maybe they'll fail. Maybe there won't be anybody who falls for anything in there, or because really what you're looking for is the methodology and how they do things and make sure that everything's being done ethically, less so than whether they're successful, because we know we can have extremely successful penetration tests that get nothing. Because again, we're not there to exploit people. We're there to test their security and let them know where their issues are, or that they don't have any issues based on your own expertise.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, I mean, it does suck writing a report that's basically blank because you always feel like imposter syndrome is so high.
Right.
But like, yeah, usually if the sites are really tiny, it's okay, well, I feel a bit better about it because, well, yeah, there's hardly anything here anyway, and everything's probably been checked several times before, but still. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a site that has the .html extension. There's probably not much there.
So sticking on the subject of social engineering a little bit, but let's go to the Layer 8 conference. Can you tell us about the Layer 8 conference, the podcast, and why you decided to create a conference focused on OSINT and social engineering?
Absolutely. It was, as I was describing my history, one of the things that I did to get my name, my face, to do the networking is that I would often volunteer at conferences. Like when I was doing the internship with Security Weekly with Paul, he said, let's build a conference. So back in 2013, we created the B-Sides Rhode Island conference, and we put that on. And then the next year, we didn't really feel like doing a B-Sides Rhode Island, but I still wanted to help out somewhere. So the next few years, I volunteered with the B-Sides Boston group and eventually got to do and be in charge of the content committee for B-Sides Boston. And I had a lot of fun with that. But eventually, one of the things that I realized is that the whole B-Sides name is really incredible. They do amazing work to the point where everybody knows who they are. Everybody trusts them, and every vendor sponsor wants to be a part of it. They just throw money at B-Sides organizations, or at least that was my experience with the Boston one. And to the point where I was like, this is just too easy. I need a little bit more of a challenge. So I want to build my own conference from the ground up. But I also don't want to build just another IT conference. I felt like there was enough of those. I really wanted something that was specific. And I remember somebody said, well, is there a conference that focuses on social engineering? I was like, no, there isn't. Maybe I'm going to do that. So in 2018, I created the first ever social engineering conference and had it in Newport, Rhode Island, which was extremely successful. Like 125 people showed up to Newport, Rhode Island. I'm like, this is amazing. And I decided to do it again the next year, where in all my conversations with people, I realized just how important OSINT was to social engineering. Like, you can't do social engineering without good OSINT reconnaissance going into it. That's how you're going to build the best pretext. So for the second year, I said, well, this is going to be a 2-track social engineering and OSINT conference, and moved it to the Rhode Island Convention Center in 2019 and had over 300 people show up. I'm like, this is great. This thing's building. We're going to go even bigger and better next year for 2020. But we had a little thing called COVID happen in 2020. So that really put a crimp on things, and we moved it online. We did the online version of Layer 8 in 20 and 21, growing to the point where I think the last time we had over 700 people attending. So it was really amazing. And then everybody got tired of the online thing. And it was really the question for a while about, can we have in-person conferences again? And what is that going to look like? So I kind of laid low until this past year, where I finally had the 5th Layer 8 conference and moved it up to Boston. And trying to grow it back, the momentum was lost a little bit with taking all that time off from the last in-person one being in 2019. The last one that was online was in 21, all the way through 25, trying to get people to hear of it again. And one of the things that I realized is that every time that I came up and brought a new instance of the conference up, it was like I was trying to introduce it to people for the first time. People weren't really remembering it from the year before. So I was losing a lot of momentum with that. One of the things that I was trying to figure out is, how do I keep that momentum going into the conference? Well, the podcast was the way that I was going to be able to do that. I figure if I talk to social engineers and OSINT investigators every week, every 2 weeks, and put out episodes with that under the Layer 8 conference name, that's going to keep the name out there for people. And that's also going to help to, again, for me to learn. I've learned so much just from being able to talk to people on the conference. We have, I can't remember, 125, 130 episodes that are all available. If you want to find the Layer 8 conference, Layer 8 podcast, those are all out there, where I usually try to alternate between an OSINT expert and a social engineer with all of those episodes, that I have all of those out. So this past year on June 14th, we had the 5th Layer 8 conference up in Boston, and I'm already putting together plans for the 6th next year. And we'll see exactly when we're going to announce the exact location, the exact date. But we are probably going to expand it even to 2 days, only because 1 day just seemed too short for it. And I know a lot of people are interested from all around, not only the New England area, not only the country, but we do have people that travel from overseas to come. We had people from England there. We had people from Netherlands, I think from Spain, from France. So people do travel really for this. And a lot of times things that I hear is that 1 day is really tough to justify traveling for the conference. So I do want to expand it to 2 days and also to just shorten the day a little bit instead of throwing so much information at people, but start growing it bigger and better and really be able to focus on making this the place for people to go. And to do that face-to-face networking, if social engineering and or OSINT is the direction that you want to be.
That's amazing. Where can people find the Layer 8 conference? What's the website?
It's super easy to remember, layer8conference.com. And if you also want to find the podcast, it's on all the different platforms. I put it out through Spotify, but it is on Apple, it's on Google Play, it's on all the different places. So if you just look for Layer 8 Podcast, you can find all of those episodes as well.
Awesome. I will put those links in the episode description too. All right, final question. Looking back at your journey, what is your biggest piece of advice for people who want to get into cybersecurity or transition from a different career?
I think if people want to do it, just know that it's going to be gradual. It's not going to be something overnight. There's so many times, like I even go on some of the Reddit boards and I see people from all different careers and they say, I want to jump into offensive security. Is that something that I can do? And the answer is always yes. Because quite often the people will say, well, I'm this age. And the age they post is one that's younger than when I made the transition. You're like, well, I'm already 26. Can I do the transition? I'm already 33. Can I do this? Am I too old? No, you're not too old. You can do it. But it is something that's going to take work. You and I have both done all the different studies and we've done the certifications and we've built our careers going in this direction. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You need to be patient with it and you might need to take little steps. We've walked through all the little steps, that I had to take to go through this. And sometimes it's like, well, this is not the thing that I want to do. Like I mentioned, the 22-year-old that wants to be a pen tester. It's like, well, I would think that's something that you want to do sometime during, I understand you want to do it right now, but if you really focus on that, that's something that you can do eventually. It's the same thing for career changers. It's really not going to be much different. You're going to have to do a lot of the same types of things. You're going to need to put in the time. I know there are some people like, I don't want to do anything after work. And I'm not sure that you're going to be able to do the career change if you're not willing to do a little bit of studying time after work. And there's also some people that might not want to take the pay cut. Sometimes that's just something you have to do. Maybe you're in a career where you're making a really good salary and the only direction for you is to go through the help desk. Well, you're probably going to need to take a pay cut in order to do that. But if this is the direction that you want to do, it is something that you can, and just know that everything that you do is pushing yourself in that direction.
It's great advice. I think taking it slow is often a better way to go anyway, because you'll learn more and you won't rush into things. And I think the imposter syndrome might be slightly minimized as well.
The imposter syndrome is definitely something that comes up. I still remember the first time that one of my managers said that to me. I thought he was actually calling me an imposter. So I had to dig in to see what he meant a little bit. And yeah, every single day you still feel like you're gonna get found out for not knowing all the things that you don't know, but that's just how it is.
Well, Patrick, thanks so much for joining me today and sharing your knowledge and experiences with us. Where can my listeners find and follow you online?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Laverty9 on there. Same thing with on the other, what is it, Twitter or X or Blue Sky.
We're calling it, yeah.
Yeah, all those things. Laverty9 on there as well.
Awesome. All right. I will again leave those links in the episode description too. Patrick, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you, Tiberius.